Hi everyone, this is the Unit 1 video. I am Professor Kinney O'Donoghue and I am looking forward to teaching this class with you. In the late 19th century, which is where we begin, Americans were still grappling with the aftermath of the Civil War, which ended in 1865. People were also concerned about the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the increasing power of corporations and monopolies, immigration, the role of women in society, cultural and ethnic differences, and how to achieve the equality promised in the foundational documents of our country. It was a time of great change and divisiveness. One change is that literature and art increasingly tried to focus on depicting the lives of everyday people in a realistic way. Proponents of American realism documented the speech and manners of all different types of people. William Dean Howells, an influential publisher and writer at the time, viewed realism as the best way to heal the divided country and give people perspectives on how others lived. Howells and others viewed literary realism as a democratic project. Two offshoots of realism became particularly popular in the late 19th century: naturalism and regionalism. Naturalism held that an individual's environment enacted an enormous influence on their development and opportunities. Much naturalist literature focuses on characters from impoverished backgrounds and the effects of violence and lack of resources. Many naturalist writers draw on the idea of de-evolution, that an industrialized and capitalist society creates humans who are immoral and unenlightened. Regionalism depicted local characteristics of specific people and places. Southern regionalist writers were especially popular in the closing decades of the 19th century. These writers sought to achieve a realistic depiction of people through writing in dialect, especially when they were writing dialogue for Black, Indigenous, or immigrant characters. These writers changed spelling and punctuation to try and reflect how they believed certain people actually spoke. While this was an extremely popular style in the late 19th century, reading dialect is difficult for contemporary readers. On the one hand, the spelling and grammatical differences force us to slow down and puzzle out the words, and on the other, the emotional experience can be a bit cringy. Given the enormous impact the Civil War had on our country, it is not surprising that many late 19th century American writers chose to set their stories during or before the war. Humans often try to understand and analyze our experiences through art and other creative means. It is also noteworthy that while dialect writing has gone out of fashion, realism has made a lasting and indelible impact on American literature. Iola Leroy by Frances Watkins Harper was written in 1892 but is set towards the end of the Civil War. We are only reading the first chapter, but the novel tells the story of Iola, a young woman whose mother has African ancestry. However, Iola's parents hid this from her. Iola's father is a plantation owner and her mother a free woman of color who can pass for white. Iola's father is a plantation owner. When Iola's father, the plantation owner, dies, the secret is revealed, and Iola is enslaved during the war before being rescued and escaping to a Union Army encampment. In Chapter 1, we see Harper use the realist literary device of dialect in a really interesting way. The enslaved people have developed a secret language so they can speak to each other freely about the advancing Union troops. Dayward by Z.Z. Packer is a contemporary short story that uses naturalist elements. It was written in 2010, but it was set in 1867. In Dayward, a young boy and his sister are technically free, but they still must run for their lives from their plantation. And then, what are they running to? They find a relative in New Orleans, but just gaining freedom does not mean that they will prosper. Desiree's Baby is a short story by Kate Chopin that is a good example of regionalism. It was published in 1893, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, but set in the antebellum, in other words, the years before the abolition of slavery. Desiree is a young mother who learns a secret about her baby's ancestry that radically changes her life. Pay attention to the details given in the story and read it carefully. There is a stunning plot twist at the end. In this story, the race of a person is incredibly important because the laws of Louisiana meant that anyone with a drop of African ancestry could be enslaved and so could their children. In his 1895 poem, We Wear the Mask, Paul Laurence Dunbar uses a blend of poetic and vernacular language to exemplify W.E.B. Du Bois's notion of double consciousness. Double consciousness, according to Du Bois, held that oppressed people, Du Bois referred specifically to African Americans, develop two selves, an external self and an internal self. The transcript has a link if you want to read more about double consciousness. Sister Carrie is an example of naturalism. Theodore Dreiser wrote the novel in 1900, and it was very controversial when it was published. The main character commits all kinds of social transgressions and still becomes successful, famous, and wealthy. People thought it delivered the wrong message. The novel tells the story of an ambitious young woman on her journey to rise above the social class she was born into. We are only reading the first chapter when Carrie first arrives in Chicago and learns she will have to negotiate her dreams versus her reality. I hope that you enjoy the readings this week, and I look forward to reading your discussion posts and reaction papers.